This is episode 47, or potentially episode 3 of Q Xavier. Q's back. Q, what you been up to, man?
What? Everything and nothing at once, my man. Everything and nothing at once. No, that's not even true.
That's exactly what I expected you would say.
That's great.
Q, I've had ideas bouncing around in my head. I want to talk to you about it. Are you ready to talk about it?
Yeah, let's do this dance.
Q, this idea has been bouncing around my head, and it's called Why We Quit. And part of the reason is
I already like it.
I know you like it, and the reason it's been bouncing around in my head is that one of the most recent podcast guests I had is a guy by the name of John Naster. He is he runs a podcast called Hack the Entrepreneur, and I was a guest on his podcast as well. And he brought me on the show and picked my brain about being an entrepreneur and tried to pick out one thing. And this is what he does on the show. He tries to pick out one thing that's a learning, something that you can apply to your own life, etc. And for me, he picked out that I essentially keep going 100% at all costs. That basically I go all in. So that was the conversation we had, and he and I talked about him being an entrepreneur and all these things. And what keeps coming through my head is this call for, in the back of all of our minds, no matter who you are and whatever, to quit. And I know you talk a lot about that. So I just wanted to let you kind of riff a little bit on this idea of quitting. You had those videos for a while where you had the woman in the video that was holding up the super heavy bar or whatever it was that said quit on it. Tell me about...
It was a gift from my coach, my strength conditioning coach, Rob Fusco, who trained me in powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting. And some kettlebell work as well. And that slosh pipe actually caused a little bit of a stir at the gym that I ran some boot camps and classes, and that whole getting that class series started is a whole lesson in how to provide value and how to really build something that gives the audience what they want. Even when they don't know that they want that thing. And the reason why we put quit on there, and it even says, I believe in the second clip, it talks specifically to this idea that quitting is you giving up something to get something. You're going to have to give something up to get to where you're trying to go. Something's going to have to give, period, whatever it is. For some people, it's some people it's very simple. Like you're not allowed to. You're no longer taking your breakfast is on the road now. You're taking your breakfast on the road, or you're going to have to give up an hour of sleep because you need to get up now and meditate, or you need to create a morning ritual. But you're going to have to give something, and everything. The old adage of there's no such thing as a free lunch. Well, if you work at a .com startup, there's probably a free lunch, but you're definitely having to give some sort of skill or expertise or something. You're providing something for that lunch. And so you're going to have to give something. It's going to be something valuable to you. And if it's not valuable to you, then you're not actually giving anything. So then the expectation of getting something in return should not be there. So when people are sitting in the wall squat or wall sit with a 20-pound slosh pipe over their head, giving up their 30 seconds of relaxation that they could have had to sit there and learn how to develop, isometric stabilization of your core, your shoulder girdle, hips, quads, blah, blah, all the rest of that fun stuff. Working all those things, anything beyond 30 seconds is, mental fortitude, as they say in the books, or as I've learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, internets. I'm always willing to learn. So when working on those things, you're going to have to give up that 30 seconds of relaxation in order to develop something that's worthwhile for the rest of your life.
So is there a difference between giving up and quitting? Really what I've been focused a lot on is, and I wrote a post the other day called Starting Over. And it may not even be published yet. Maybe it is. I don't remember. But anyway, the idea was that we're always starting over. So no matter what, you go to sleep the next day, you're starting over. You're starting from scratch basically every single day, every moment of your life. You could just stop moving forward or even pausing, and you're still starting over. It's a conscious decision at all times. And quitting is somewhere in this equation where along the way you decide to quit at something, or maybe you decide to give up, and is there a difference? And you've spoken a lot about quitting. Why do people quit on things, whether it be strength training or an initiative or whatever? Why do people quit?
Because they find something more valuable than the thing. You lose. The word that we generally use is perspective. And so I'll stick with that for the time being until my brain or my mind comes up with a better word to use. We lose perspective. You start thinking short. You start looking, and I do it myself. You start looking short. For instance, last year, driving back and forth, developing the video series for, fitness and for training and helping people develop body weight training and things of that nature. And, we went around shopping it around and trying to see whether or not people were interested, and we had interest, and we went through I started going through the, investment process and things of that nature. The temptation is to say, well, nobody's buying it, nobody's moving on it. We're going to stop this. And so let's kind of break apart quitting into like 3 categories. There's stopping, which is I'm not doing this right now. I may pick it up later. Giving up, which is this isn't going the way that I want it to, so I'm done now. And quitting, which means there's something I need this thing. And in order to get this thing, I have to give this other thing. So you're totally allowed to quit. And you're going to need to. It's going to have to stop. You're going to have to quit. You're totally allowed to stop and pick it back up. It happens when working out. It happens in strategy sessions, when working with creatives, trying to translate a creative brief into language that a creative can understand. By virtue of research, data research, and then developing those insights that they can then take and go amazing places with. And then there's a stop. We have to stop that process of, that kind of analytical thinking and go into this creative thinking. So we have stop where we're going to pick up that analytical thinking later. It's going to be valuable later. Such as you go to sleep that night, you're done with that level of thinking, you're on to a new day, and you wake up, you watch something new, and it sparks a new level of thinking that makes yesterday's work either infinitely more valuable, or you look at yesterday's work and go, ooh, I'm never going down that road again. And that's giving up. That's where you go, I'm never doing that again. And a lot of people give up when they should really just be quitting and picking out something else they should be doing along those lines. For instance, man, every time I go to the gym, I run on the treadmill and I've never lose 10 pounds, so I'm done going to the gym and running on the treadmill. Well, have you ever thought of lifting weights? Well, I don't get bulky, so I'm not going to do that. Well, you've given up on weightlifting before you've even gotten out the gate. I've tried this thing, it's not working, so I'm not doing it. And there's value in doing that, but if you look at, and that's what science is important for, because science gives us that basis to say, well, it's been done 32 times effectively, or it's reached this critical point where it's been done effectively, so maybe I should keep going. There's enough brands that have been developed via YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, by virtue of just providing, valuable information, providing insight, providing that level of relatability that big, huge brands kind of poo-poo on, because they just don't have that insight to see, that ground level conversation. So they let go of that. Whereas, you look at the science of, if you keep doing this, it does work. If you keep grinding away at the stone, you will eventually pick up. It may not be the audience that you want, and that's a whole other conversation. But you are going to get traction, especially if you're providing value, especially if you're providing something interesting, especially if you're stimulating intrigue. And then when they get past the intrigue, you have substance. So looping back to quitting, people are going to have to give up something, and that's okay. But you gotta figure out what you're quitting for, and whether or not what you're quitting for is more valuable than what you're actually doing.
I think what's interesting about this, it leads perfectly into the next thing I wanted to ask you about, in which that's the difference between what we really want versus what we say we want versus what we need. And I think all of those come into play between quitting, giving up, and stopping. Because if we're really clear about what we want versus what we say we want, and if what we really want is actually a match for what we need, there's a lot less chance that we're going to quit. Or even at the very least, I think even among these, there's stop, giving up, and quitting that you mentioned. But there's also kind of course correcting, which is to continue on to kind of, which I guess to your way of describing it, that would be quitting the one thing and then going in a different direction. But so what, I think what's interesting, and the reason I wanted to have you on the show to talk about this specifically, is that the work that you do with strength and conditioning and fitness, I mean, you're already dealing with people who are saying that they want something and often really they mean something else. And they're dealing with actual physical endurance, which is the easiest way to get somebody to stop or quit or even give up on something. And then at the same time, you work with businesses and you're dealing with strategy and you're dealing with, pitches and content marketing. So we're playing with a lot of different worlds that can intersect, and taking what you've learned about why people quit and why they say they want something when they really want something different. It's applicable across everything. So tell me a little bit about what you've seen in any of your areas that you've done work about the difference between what we really want versus what we say we want versus what we need.
What we really want, what we say we want versus what we need.
Yeah.
That is like the education system's problem, and it's one of those things that normally I would say, you know what, it's kind of like this. We don't know that we don't know, and we're trying to grasp at straws of things that look familiar, so that way we can say, but that's kind of what I'm looking for. That's similar. It's the same, but I want something a little bit different. And so, and what you need is to go through the process of a lot of times going after what you want. Let's go back to the guy on the treadmill. He or she, or the lady on the treadmill even, they've spent, however many days, weeks, months, years on that treadmill trying to get that last 5-10 pounds to move, or just trying to get the needle to move on the scale. And, well, they haven't... I'm allowed to curse on here, Jeff?
Of course.
They don't give a shit yet, because they're going off of what they see some other people doing rather than investigating. And this is where kind of that Neil deGrasse Tyson version of scientific literacy, like the ability to investigate what you say you want and what it takes to get there. If I look at the cover of a magazine and I see, Kai Green, Arnold 2006, pose down champion. The man is mythic. All right, always number 2 to Phil Heath, but his physique is insane and his work ethic is just as insane. If I see him, well, I want to look like that. And I noticed that he's lifting weights. But I've been lifting weights, and I've been doing every single program that he's done. Well, how much have you investigated into his program? Well, his eating habits, his nutritional support, his supplemental support, his coaching. Well, I don't have that kind of budget. Well, then you need to figure out ways to expand your budget to get what you want. So what you have is a budgetary problem. And in order to increase that budget, well, it's going to take more time it's going to take more time for you to develop your skill set outside of that in order to get what you want. A lot of people and a lot of brands don't realize, or a lot of people who run brands don't realize that a lot of what you want involves you developing a system by which you're able to feed what it is you're trying to do, because you can really only get one thing done. You can have that one thing affect many areas, but it's really not going to be as effective as you want it to be. So if you're trying to get something done, look at all the sacrifices that, if we're going to use Kai Green, or let's use an entrepreneur. Pick one. Pick any entrepreneur that's successful and built a sub-unicorn company. You can use Gary Vaynerchuk. You can use Casey Neistat. You can use all of that. They sacrificed a level of privacy by virtue of having videos on them all the time, and the ability to be right all the time. So they're in front of the cameras all the time. So they're going to say things that they're not right about all the time. And they've given that up. But they need that in order to be right the next time. And so to answer your question, to circle back to your question, if there's something that you want, then you have to have the ability to investigate it and to be wrong about it, and to learn that lesson so that you can get what you want. Because you might be going after something that is unique to a specific person's genetic structure, DNA, or specific to a certain brand's culture and how they were built. And you're not going to get Red Bull kind of traction going after and doing what Red Bull does. But you can get that kind of traction if you go after something that's center and congruent to you. Going extreme is center and congruent to what Red Bull is, and they've made it their business to own that market, right?
Yes.
Kai Green, a bodybuilder, has made having the most muscle and the minimal amount of fat at 275 pounds his goal, and everything he does is congruent to that. You showing up for an hour and deciding in this hour I'm going to try to be like Kai Green, or you building a company and taking some videos of you jumping off a bench is not going to get you to Red Bull. It's not going to get you there. And so you have to it comes back to that idea. You really have to look at your ethos and being congruent to what that is. And then once you figure out what that is, it's making sure that what that is what resonates in how people see you when you step out of your door. If that's not how it is, then it's not going to work. Because I can be lifting weights all day and think at 190 pounds that I'm the business at 5'6". However, when I step out the door, a girl looks at me and be like, "Man, you all right? That dude over there is 190 and he's got like 3% body fat, or actually more realistically, 10% or 9% body fat, and I'm rolling around at like 14. But still, like, I'm not where he is." So it gets a little bit there. It's like knowing yourself well enough to know how you compare against other folks, and then figuring out what gives you that edge to get above. So, and you only get that. And the messed up part about it, Jeff, like what messes me up all the time about it, and what messes everybody up about it, you have to know yourself well enough and listen enough to other people's input to know where you need to place yourself where nobody else is, where you're not competing with as many people.
So is this sort of the blue ocean strategy situation?
I don't know if I know the reference, but explain it to me.
It's a book, I believe, called Blue Ocean Strategy, and it's this idea about kind of finding, the less crowded spaces, finding your niche audience, and finding, less competition. Essentially, that's kind of. It sounds like kind of what you're saying is know yourself, know what your strengths are, and be able to find the place where you can bring out those strengths in the best possible way, so that you can have the best chance of succeeding with what you're best at in a lower competitive environment.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't read the book, but given your synopsis, I have a tendency to agree with it, and it's showing up that way as much as possible. And then when you don't show up that way and somebody brings it to your attention, not fighting it. Like when you fight it, you're resisting the opportunity to give up that mindset, that way of thinking, that way of being, right? You're losing a unique opportunity to literally give up this pattern of doing things that's not working. I always show up to the gym in sweatpants and a t-shirt, and I'm always doing sprints, and somebody comes over and goes, "If you're going to do sprints, you really should start wearing shorts, and you should probably change your shoes into something that's more conducive to sprinting." And they're like, "But this is what I wear." Well, that's not, and you start defending it. This is what I wear. This is how I do it. This is who I am, right? I'm using a benign example, right? So this is how I do it. Well, how you're doing it isn't working, so you're going to have to give that up in order to get that sprint time up, which is going to help you potentially drop that excess body fat, or increase your performance, or make you more reactive, or increase your power production, or all of those things, which is what it actually does.
So let me ask you this, just as a point to wrap this whole idea of quitting and what we want versus what we say we want, what we need. You've done a lot of work with with brands and helping them to kind of stay the course and figure out where they need to go, and being real with themselves about expectations and all of that sort of good stuff. And then you've also worked with individuals who are pushing past their own physical limitations, and you're getting them to not quit, not stop, and not give up in the face of what would be burning muscles that are releasing lactic acid. So you're literally pushing people physically and mentally in different areas of your life. Have you seen anything that you can say is the commonality, or the kind of the secret that these people are tapping to be able to continue on and not quit? What is it? Is it that they're purpose driven? Is it that they have a certain way of perceiving the world? Is it a flexibility and ability to be persuaded or open to being wrong? What is the thing that you've seen as kind of a commonality, just as a point to wrap up this giving up, quitting, goal setting sort of thing?
Okay, this is important, and I actually said this yesterday. I said this in 3 different scenarios. I said this when talking to somebody relative to their own personal strategy or own personal plan to develop themselves as far as a manager. I worked with a group of people in a boot camp class, and then I was also developing a strategy for a brand. And I literally, these 2 words: be patient. And there's more behind that. You have thought about this, and you're actively thinking about this. So your mind is made up. And so when you look to your body to do something, or when you look to the paper, or when you look to your audience to do something, your mind is made up. You've already decided in your mind. The audience of your mind has already, like all of the personalities that are in your brain jumping around, the one who wants to go party, the one who wants to look good, the one who wants to talk to the girls, the guys, the one who wants to be a family person, the one who wants to be a best friend, all those people in your brain have made up their mind. And they're like, okay, we're ready to go. And then you go do it, and you're like, why don't I have any results? Because your body, because your external audience needs time to catch up with your new pattern. And in that time is where you have to be patient. You have to pick yourself back up and keep going. It doesn't matter if your legs are quivering this one day, they're not going to quiver the next as much.
Got it.
You might have bumped, it's that.
I dig it. I like the way that you explain that essentially there's the time between when you've made the decision internally, kind of all of your mindsets are towards these individual things, whatever it might be. And then there's the time in between the result and when you've made that decision that you have to be patient and work your way through.
Right. You just have to keep going. Man, I'm going to go walk to my car right now. I've made that decision. I get up and start walking to my car. There's time and distance between I get there. Now, that's a short walk. It's right outside the door. All I got to do is walk there. It's like, maybe 100 yards, not even. However, that happens in personal relationships. I'm going to make sure that when I meet my lady, I always give her a kiss, and she's going to love it. Well, the first time she gets a kiss, and she's like, why is this dude giving me a kiss? Next time, oh, wow, now it's an expectation. Now it's a new pattern. Now it's the 5th time, and you've forgotten to do it. Because like any new pattern, like any new habit, like any learned behavior, you will forget. Because we learn as fast as we forget. So she's like, where's my kiss? And you're like, oh, snap. There you go. Same thing with your squad. Same thing with your audience and your brand. Okay? They all of a sudden used to seeing your Instagram posts with you doing whimsical stuff, jumping off of bridges, and now you're like the extreme person. Woo! They're used to seeing you. Right? And then all of a sudden one day you don't post. And the next day you don't post. And then you get a Twitter post, you get a Twitter thing that says XYZ brand no longer cares about extreme sports, or no longer cares about making people better, or no longer cares about this. And then they start asking questions of you. And then that's your chance to learn something that you forgot to do, because they have an expectation that you're going to do that. And when people expect, that's when you have them. That's when you start building the habit, you start building the muscle. When your body isn't, when there's an expectation, when there's an audience anticipating you, when your body is anticipating the next movement, when that's happening, then you've hit pay dirt. Keep going then. You'll always win there.
Dig it. And that's an excellent point for us to wrap up on. So many people give you empty, vague platitudes of inspiration and such, and Q, you always come and bring it real. I appreciate that. Thank you for batting around this idea with me. Like I said, it was bouncing around in my head, and I know that you're a busy dude, so I appreciate you picking it up and just jumping on this call with me because I felt like chatting about it. So thanks, as always, for coming onto the show.
Dude, I love this format. I hope you do more of it. These little short snippets are beautiful. Keep this going, man. This is solid.
I am definitely attempting to make sure my podcast is happening more frequently. We made some sort of a top 10 list. We were an honorable mention, and the commentary they gave was it would be nice if they were more frequent, or if it wasn't so sporadic that they posted. So I'm really trying to step that game up. As you know, running a business, there's so many things you have to do, but this is something that it's always very rewarding for me, if for no other reason than I get to have conversations like we just had and pick the brain of smart people like yourself. So thanks for coming on, man.
Dude. Jeff Q, Jeff, Volume 3 is complete. Let's get on to Volume 4, my man.
We're going to do it. All right, have an awesome rest of the day. And for all of you listening, thank you for listening.